أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أولم ير الذين كفروا أن السماوات والأرض كانتا رقة ففتقناهما وجعلنا من الماء كل شيء حي أفلا يؤمنون وجعلنا في الأرض رواسي أن تميد بهم وجعلنا فيها فجاجا وسبلا لعلهم يهتدون وجعلنا السماء سقفا محفوظا وهم عن آياته معرضون وهو الذي خلق الليل والنهار والشمس والقمر كل في فلك يسبحون. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Do not the unbelievers see that the heavens and the earth were joined together as one unit of creation before we clove them asunder? We made from water every living thing. Will they then not believe? And we have set on the earth mountains standing firm, lest it should shake with them. And we have made therein broad highways between mountains for them to pass through, that they may find their way. And we have made the heavens as a canopy well guarded. Yet do they turn away from the signs which these things point to. It is He who created the night and the day, and the sun and the moon. All celestial bodies swim along, each in its rounded course." Assalamu alaikum. Ramadan Mubarak. Welcome to another edition of Islam for Europeans. I'm your host, Robert. I do apologize that I have not made a video in quite some time, but I figured that this video was long overdue. I haven't made a conversion story, since I created this channel. Not because I don't like, telling my conversion story. I honestly don't mind it at all, although it does get a bit repetitive over time. But I just felt that this is a good opportunity to, talk about it because, at the end of the day, you know, it does kind of feel like grandstanding sometimes, and it kind of, sometimes it can be seen as downplaying what actually happens after converts take their shahada, which is the main focus of this channel. However, it being Ramadan and everything, and many Muslims love to hear, why, uh, converts, converted to Islam. What were the circumstances behind it? Because it gives a great, boost to their iman, to their faith. And there's definitely utility in that. So I don't disparage from converts giving their shahada story, or even myself from telling about how I came to Islam. Um, and in addition to that, it does, give a lot of insight into, I guess, what precipitates people, or sort of, leads the way for people to not only convert to Islam but join a Muslim community. Um, so here it goes. I was born in a small town in 1981 to a white Canadian family. My dad is French Canadian, and my mom is a white American. She's with Polish, Dutch, and Armenian heritage. I was born and raised Catholic, along with my younger brother. Our family, we weren't really practicing Catholics per se. We just went to, Christmas and Easter. It was more of a tradition than something that was readily practiced in the household. But, my parents still wanted me to have, a religious education. So that's, why they put us into Catholic grade school and high school. And I grew up in a small town in southwestern Ontario. It was 95% white, mostly of Italian, French, and Irish heritage. And the same goes for my school. It was very homogeneous. So Islam wasn't really discussed that much at all. It was not even something that had even on my radar, um, basically until the 10th grade. Um, but I did notice that, when I went through high school, even though, I did get along well with, my classmates for the most part, um, that the lifestyle that was kind of like the haram lifestyle really didn't appeal to me. And everyone, it was almost like a rite of passage that you had to go through this, binge drinking phase, and use of hardcore drugs, and girlfriends and boyfriends, and getting into all sorts of haram actions. But that just really, I was really averse to that. And I just kept thinking why that was. Whenever I would get into a situation where I would be near any of these things, whether it be zina, girlfriends, or gambling, or even alcohol use. I just had this sick feeling to my stomach. It was almost like I was going to throw up. Like it was just, I couldn't explain it. And I thought, what is wrong with me? Like I just couldn't get why, like everyone else is going through this, where they just wanted to, follow in the footsteps of their parents, where, it was just like this kind of party lifestyle. And it just wasn't me. I just didn't feel very comfortable in that, but that created a lot of tension, I guess, in high school. My first exposure to Islam was when I went to, we had a religion class. I had to take religion class, in Catholic school all the way up until grade 12. And in grade 10, we actually went on a field trip and visited different religious buildings that were not, Roman Catholic. We went to a Hindu temple. We went to an Orthodox church. And, the final place we went to was Dominion Mosque in Windsor, Ontario. And this is the mosque where I ended up taking my Shahada several years later. When we all sat at the back of the prayer room, me and my classmates, and we watched, the men pray. And, I just was kind of taken aback by it. It was just very involved. Like normally when Catholics pray, it's just the Lord's Prayer and only takes about 30 seconds, but these prayers took several minutes. I was just kind of really, I guess, interested, or just, kind of enamored by the involvement of the prayer. And I did want to ask, do Muslims believe in a day of judgment, to the sister who was, giving the tour, but I just never worked up the guts, I guess. So, skip ahead, to my, I graduated high school, and all my classmates basically, moved on to bigger and better things. They entered university or college or the workforce. I just didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. I did not pursue post-secondary education at the time. I was basically living at home, with my brother. And, the first job that I got was for a pizza restaurant in my hometown. And this was run by Turkish Muslims. They're good friends of mine. And, I worked for them for quite a while. They weren't, I guess you can say they weren't practicing Muslims. But they still had a very generous culture about them, a very honest culture about them. They were straight shooters, and even though the one boss I was very tough, and it really molded me into a better worker. I think I it was really a terrible example of a worker. I was very, my mind was scattered. I was very unmotivated, but I wanted to prove myself. And I think, it was almost like being in the military, this type of, like, theory X type of business management, where, your workers are basically soldiers, and, if they do something wrong, you basically tear a strip off them. So, it did give me some, kind of a background into interaction with Muslims. But skip ahead to 2001, 9/11 happens. And my parents, we were running a comedy club at the time, and I was working at the pizza place at the time. And I was very angry. I thought, that, I bought the official party line, official, a media story that this was done by Muslims. And, how could, someone cause such a destruction of loss of life? It just was taken aback by it. And then several weeks later, one of the comedians at my parents' comedy club, was saying, it wasn't done by Muslims. And, I was just taken aback. I just was perplexed as to why. I mean, he said, how could, someone's passport fly out of an airplane, it's completely sealed, and end up on the ground in perfect condition? How could they have all these photos of all the people who committed the act, the very same day that the event happened as well? So, that got my mind thinking, and I started to become like this big kind of inquisitive, truth-seeking person. The person that told me this was also a white nationalist. and he wanted to try to get me into joining white nationalism, and showed me some websites, and I was kind of really turned off from that. I wasn't turned off in the sense that the idea that the plight of the Palestinian people, which he highlighted, and also you know um, how a liberal society can really tear society down and create all these problems. Um, so that aspect, there was some merit to it, but the racialist sort of denigration of other peoples and their different skin tones. I mean, I just thought that was abhorrent. So I was very confused at the time, a young 21-year-old, pizza delivery driver, but I was still very inquisitive. So I kept researching these things, like the moon landings being fake and Kennedy assassination being done by whom and who really controls the world. And around this time, I started watching Malcolm X, the movie Malcolm X. And the first time I watched it, I didn't really think much of it. And then I, gave it a second glance, and I started to really, admire, the Hajj and him going to Mecca and seeing, Muslims from all walks of life, including, blonde-haired, blue-eyed Muslims, and that changed his whole perspective on race, especially race relations in the United States. I'm not sure if I'm missing anything, during this, this kind of interregnum time period. But I would say that, during, this whole time, I mean, even being involved in, environments where there's alcohol and drug use and things like that, I couldn't take it. I just felt like, like this just didn't appeal to me. And I just felt totally sick to my stomach. So Islam was big in the news at the time. This is around when the United States was invading Afghanistan and Iraq. And there was this huge protest against the war that I wanted to join, which never got a chance to. But since Islam was still somewhere in the back of my mind, and because it was so politically motivated, given what was going on in the media, one night at night at my parents' house, I was just alone by myself, and I typed in SISLAM enter on the internet. Did a Google search, and the first website I came to had a picture of an unborn baby in the mother's womb. And I thought to myself, what does this have to do with Islam? Like, do I have the right website? What is this about? And this website talked about how, there are verses in the Quran that contain information that we only know now with the technology of the 20th century. And I was just blown away. I couldn't believe it. I was just like, nobody told me this. I mean, this is the evidence, for proof of God that we're looking for. Before I thought it was just impossible. How could you actually prove that God exists? I grew up watching movies like Contact, that talked about this very issue. How could God create this world and this universe and not leave any evidence behind of his creation? Well, here we have this book, that was written in the 7th century that we know from carbon dating, that is talking about, just the verses that I quoted, the Big Bang, the fact that mountains block the effect of earthquakes in those regions, the fact that the sun and the moon are in orbit, one following the other. And I was just blown away. I just couldn't believe it. The fact that, the development of the unborn baby in the mother's womb, is very precise. And I read on, that's what got me hooked. And I ended up reading, like Surat al-Baqarah, chapter 2, the cow, basically that whole night. And, that just got me interested in Islam. It really scared me too, to an extent, because, it talked about, the hellfire and, this is the path that God wants us to follow for salvation from that. So I guess the religious salvific exclusivity of Islam also really draws you in as well. And I think that's really important in dawah. I mean, it's a tough pill to swallow. But as you read on in the Quran, it talks about, the reward for the believers, and, that this is the path that God wants us to follow. And it talked about all the prophets and messengers that were in the Bible previously. And I had read the Bible before, but I just kept thinking there was no proof, that these messengers ever existed. But now we have the proof, and I'm just like, wow, I guess the Jews and Christians, to an extent, were right all along. It's just that there are different aspects of their religions that just needed to be updated and and modified and corrected. So I studied Islam on my own. I didn't tell anybody about it. For the next 8 months, I didn't even tell my bosses who were Muslim. I was even reluctant to buy a Quran from chapters, because I thought to myself, what would the person, what would the worker think of me when I bought it? Because I guess Islam was a very hot button topic at the time, and it got associated with terrorism and to a very high extent. I mean, not as much as we see now in 2022, but it was a very, very taboo subject, right? So yeah, I didn't tell many people about it. I wanted to make it a completely independent study. And during this time period, I started to notice changes. Like I stopped eating pork, and I started to have very vivid dreams, actually. And the biggest dream that I can think of is when you know I dreamt that I was giving food or money to a poor person, and then I looked up and I saw this enormous light, just shine down on me. It was really impossible to describe. It was just like, I guess there was kind of hear that angelic noise being associated with it, but it was just undescribable. And then when I woke up, I didn't feel fear. I just felt this, kind of comfort, and then kind of just dozed back to sleep after that. But yeah, it was just Allah just slowly drawing me into the faith of Islam. Yeah, so I had tried to go to the mosque a few times, once or twice. I just didn't. I was too reluctant to go. I just felt, like, what are they going to think of me? Maybe I'm not ready for this. But then Ramadan came along. This is back when Ramadan was in November, and I, made a promise to God that I would fast, a few of these days, at least 2 or 3 or 4 of them. Right. So I did fast a few of these days. I didn't tell my family about it, and yeah. And then one day I was just, thinking about going to the mall, about driving to the mall. And on my way to the mall, I just ended up going to the mosque in Windsor, the same mosque that I went to the open house previously. And I walked in and I saw these 2 Muslim kids playing basketball, and I said, "Assalamu alaikum," and they said, "Wa alaikum salam." I go upstairs and I end up talking to this brother from the Tablighi Jamaat who greeted me, and he asked, like, why are you here? Like, why are you interested in Islam? And I said, in my opinion, there's no way that a human being can write this book. It's just impossible. And he said, well, what are you waiting for? You already have all the qualities of a Muslim. And I thought, well, I just thought I'd think about it for a little bit. And he said, well, you know what? You don't know what could happen when you leave this place. You don't know if, God forbid, you get struck by lightning, you're getting into a car accident, and the hellfire is very hot. So why don't you do this? We'll give you this room to yourself for 5 minutes and just think about it. Just think about, what Allah wants you to do. So I said, okay, fine, no problem. So, they had this room in the back at the mosque. I had all to myself. There were a few books there. And I just sat down. I started to, wanted to pray or contemplate or meditate or whatever. And all of a sudden, my jaw started shaking like 100 times a second. Like, I couldn't explain it. It was just like supernatural. Like, the shaking just would not stop. And finally, I picked up an English translation of the Quran from the bookshelf, started reading the English translation, and, the shaking stopped. Okay. And then the gentleman came back in. He said, well, what do you think? And I said, I'm ready. Let's do it. So he said, okay. So we went into the prayer room. And then the imam, like he said, do you want to convert to Islam? I said, yes. So I ended up taking my shahada right there. And that started my day one into my long journey into Islam. So alhamdulillah, I'm glad that Allah has guided me, and us, up until this point. Just a few things afterwards, like the Muslim community, they were very accommodating and welcoming, and they invited me to the iftar that day. I ended up telling my parents like a week afterwards, and they were okay with it. I was very, very relieved. My dad actually shook my hand when I converted to Islam. So, had they not reacted that way, had it been like, really a seriously negative reaction from them, I don't think I would have made it. I mean, honestly, the Muslim community, they're very nice and cordial and friendly and everything. But when it comes to relations with the converts' family members and the converts' family members reaching out to the Muslim community, those are 2 spheres that are very separate. I mean, again, like my small town is half an hour away from Windsor. So yeah, so that's pretty much about it for my conversion story to Islam. I hope you liked it. Like we will start. I'm going to start making more videos. I have a lot of things to talk about. I just haven't made that many just because it's Ramadan and it's been so busy. But if you are new to our channel, please subscribe to Islam for Europeans. We are an organization that's dedicated to healing the broken relationship between Islam and the West. And we feel that our solutions will have benefits for both the West at large and the Muslim community as well. So that's my time for today. I'm Robert from Islam for Europeans. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.